Chapter 201, Ask for Leave. Cho looked thinner than the last time I visited her. I hadn't expected the Mid-Autumn Festival and National Day to fall so close together. I'll stay at her place for 2 days, then take one more day off for National Day. I wish everyone a happy National Day holiday. Updates will resume tomorrow. Chapter 202, You Lose. Above the island that housed the League's headquarters, two titans clashed. One had a body like compressed neutron star matter, an indestructible mass of iron, and the other unleashed a seemingly infinite output of energy, a silver sun of light that vaporized everything it struck. Their battle escalated so violently that Clark and those fighting Major Force were forced to pull far away from the island. Iron fists met torrents of energy. The blasts drove molten rock into the sky, turning the island into a field of lava. Everything on it was obliterated. Everyone watched the terrible spectacle from a distance, hearts pounding. Even the seas boiling, someone gasped. Flash hovered above the water, his body flickering in a high-speed vibration as he kept himself on the surface. Beneath his feet, seawater churned like a pot on a superheated stove. For miles around the island, the ocean boiled and smoked, white froth roiling all the way to the ports of Gotham and Metropolis. People on shore pulled out their phones, stunned and frightened. "What is that? Is it the end of the world?" someone whispered. "Is it the Justice League? Are they fighting something that huge?" No one on the piers knew exactly where the League headquarters sat, only that it was near Metropolis. The public assumed the League was once again intercepting a city-ending threat. No one guessed that this time the threat opposite them was the White House's new super task force. "Is Overman okay?" Arthur murmured, the boiling water a painful reminder of how lethal even a stray spill of the fight's energy could be. Clark watched, his heat vision cutting through the haze to track the two combatants. David, Overman, had grown stronger. Clark could see it plainly as David pushed in through a barrage of raw energy, forcing Atom Captain to dodge. The look on Clark's face was one of mounting alarm. The infinite energy strikes Atom Captain could unleash were terrifyingly potent, and if directed at him, could do grievous harm. "His strength just keeps increasing," Clark said under his breath. "If we'd stayed..." Hal trailed off. The island's vegetation had been incinerated, reduced to a continuous sheet of molten rock. Green Lantern and Flash exchanged horrified looks. A ripple like that from the fight could already turn a world to glass. It was hard to imagine how David could still be pressing the attack while withstanding such bombardment. Above the water, Major Force tore through the sky, striking again. A wild punch was blocked by Batman, and Clark followed with a sidelong blow that sent Major Force reeling. The powers Major Force had gained were a rough, degraded echo of Atom Captain's infinite energy abilities. Still, even he had to admit how terrifying Atom Captain was. "He may have infinite energy, but he doesn't have infinite strength," Clark snarled, throwing his full weight into the struggle as Major Force growled taunts. Major Force laughed. "Surrender. You can't win. His energy is without limit." "Then surrender, and maybe I'll show mercy later," Major Force sneered. "You'll be in my hands soon enough." Clark's temper snapped. "Someone needs to replace your president if they think this is acceptable," he snapped, and together the League pushed Major Force back. Hal's ring formed a green fist that smashed into Major Force's face. "I'm a Green Lantern. The whole sector's mine," Hal scoffed. The team pinned Major Force down, at least for the moment, but on the battlefield between Atom Captain and David, everything was more desperate. Jitong's face had gone cold at Major Force's words. She had been dragged into assisting against the League, and it soured her resolve. Buzz, bone-like cracks sounded as David absorbed another annihilating beam. He ignored burns crawling across his skin and drove his fist into Atom Captain's chest. Crack, crack. Sternum and plating splintered under the assault. Atom Captain grimaced, surprised. "Your strength, beyond what I expected," he wheezed. Like a cornered animal, Atom Captain tightened his grip on David's shoulder. "You don't know. I've always kept my power constrained to stop myself becoming a walking nuclear bomb that could wipe out half the states, but this constant drain is making me lose control. It's risky, but I must end this fast." He braced, energies coiling. Atom Captain was a metal fortress of violent power, constantly repairing his wounds to keep the core energy from spilling out. Then his chest flared. a bright flare on his silver casing, and a pillar of light tore from his breastplate, a beam striking from ground to sky. David, already reeling from wounds, watched Atom Captain's body open like a door to the quantum field. The hero had made himself a portal. Through it poured a river of quantum energy, endless, howling, and terrible. The light that roared out was like a second sun. David felt it wash through him, a roaring current of light and heat that seemed to split the air. It arced up, out past the atmosphere, visible in space. For one impossibly quiet second, the world held its breath. David, Clark's cry cut through the silence as the light faded. When the radiance died, Atom Captain's silver surface sputtered and dimmed, lights flickering across his armor. He looked spent. David looked worse. A hole the size of a water bucket had been torn straight through his chest, the edges blackened and seared as if by a laser. No blood leaked. Internal organs and heart were vaporized in a charred, hollow gap. Major Force threw back his head and laughed, clutching his own injured chest. Jitong's face drained of color. Overman, the man who had saved the world so many times, seemed to be dying now, and she had been forced to help put him here. No! Green Lantern and the others shouted, unable to accept the sight. They had seen David lead them to victory against enemies stronger than gods. They had never imagined they would see him reduced to this. But as everyone reeled, David raised his head. Despite the mortal wound, despite the smoking, bucket-sized hole through him, his eyes were bright. He stared at Atom Captain and sneered with the kind of small, terrible smile that had toppled foes before. "You lost," David said. Chapter 203. This matter is not over yet. Atom Captain's full power strike had shredded David's chest, but it hadn't killed him. He was alive and visibly desperate. Not every healing ability equals absolute immortality. Black Adam, for example, can recover with lightning, but a crushed heart or a severed head still kills him. Seeing David's heart and internal organs vaporized and yet seeing him still breathe made Atom Captain freeze. The worst case had happened. David's healing was the dangerous kind. He didn't just regenerate, he was effectively immortal. "You lose," David said. He closed on Atom Captain like an iron vice, clamping his neck so tight the man began to choke. Atom Captain wasn't gasping from lack of air, but in terror of what David might do next. "No, you can't," he croaked. Before he could finish, David's fist, like a mountain-shattering blow, smote his chest and stomach. Atom Captain arched, cutting himself off with a gag of pain as blow after blow pulverized his torso. If his reconstructed body still needed blood, he would now be spitting it everywhere from those wounds. "Opening the floodgates destroys everything in its path," David said, tightening his grip. "But a flood that's left running will eventually break the dam. Trying to stop it and restore the bank isn't easy. How much power do you have left?" Holding Atom Captain midair, David watched the silver body flicker. The earlier attack had been terrifying, but it had been almost all of Atom Captain's output. He didn't have much left. His quantum-linked form was unstable, collapsing. "If I go, there will be a huge explosion," Atom Captain managed. A dangerous light pulsed in his chest, an ultra-hot, molten glare that seemed to stream through the metal of his torso. At least several hundred surrounding cities would be razed. Your teammates won't survive, either. David knew Atom Captain wasn't exaggerating. In the comics, the man was notorious, godlike energy but liable to explode from certain damage, nicknamed by some the self-destruct captain. "I don't intend to kill you here," David said. With most of his chest healed and his body feeling stronger, David tightened his hold and, using the planet's gravity, slingshot upward. He launched himself toward space with Atom Captain in his grip. Everyone on the ground watched, stunned. David, chest gaping, acting as if nothing had happened, gripping the wounded Atom Captain and rocketing off the planet. "He can do that too?" Green Lantern asked, looking at Clark. "Maybe," Clark said, scratching his head. He didn't know whether David had long had this tendency or if it was new. Before today, almost no one could wound him this badly, so nobody knew he could be immortal. Batman stared up at the disappearing figures. The others nodded. Even a gaping chest wound had been rare for anyone but a handful of attackers capable of harming Overman. No, Major Force swallowed hard. Overman hadn't died. Atom Captain, who had expended everything, was the one in trouble now. He tried to flee, abandoning the task force mission. He only wanted to survive. I heard Overman never held back, he muttered. If he kills Adam Captain, it'll be my turn next. He turned and saw Batman step into his path, voice cold. Where do you think you're going, Major Force? Clark and the others boxed him in. Far above, David and Adam Captain had left the atmosphere. The light in Adam Captain's chest became urgent. This position is about right, Adam Captain said, jaw set. Tens of thousands of miles above Earth, the dying man gripped David with both hands. You're going to collapse your own body? From beyond the glass of the stratosphere came a furnace's heat, a terrible, approaching searing. David raised an eyebrow. He had only just left the planet. His body should not be collapsing so quickly. There was only one explanation. He had stopped holding his collapsing form together, and Adam Captain had activated his signature move, self-destruction. Will you show me mercy, Overman? Adam Captain asked fiercely. My death is inevitable. Before I die, I want to take you with me, the biggest threat to the White House. Adam Captain's face twisted. Overman had, on live global broadcast, killed Lex Luthor without hesitation. Very few supervillains had survived encounters with him. The president's psychological profile had called David cold-blooded and beyond the law. The White House had issued an arrest warrant. After today, Overman would surely retaliate against the administration. Your situation doesn't give me any choice either, David said. Adam Captain's energy reserves were terrible, but still dangerous. Even a single remaining fingertip of power could blow up an island. To prevent a future threat, David could only eliminate him. Too bad you don't have enough left to hold me, Adam Captain snarled. David wrenched free of Adam Captain's grip. The weakened man could no longer hold on. David's fists snapped into Adam Captain's face, sending him reeling backward. Come with me to another world, then, David said. Adam Captain tumbled back, and arms spread like a madman, laughed. His silver chest flared scarlet as if a star were bursting free of its casing, and then came the most terrible explosion. It was the birth of a universe in miniature, a blinding, all-consuming white light that annihilated and swallowed everything around it. Truly loyal, he cried as the light overwhelmed. David, who had already put distance between them, looked back once with a grim expression, and then the light took him. From Earth's surface, the entire hemisphere saw a glare bright enough to rival the sun. Cities unraveled into panic. Many who stared directly were temporarily blinded. The world seemed to darken under that white glare. I can't see! My eyes! People screamed. What is that? Crowds cried. Is it judgment? Heaven, God help! On the ocean, several members of the task force had pinned the frantically fleeing Major Force, wounding him severely. Batman grabbed him and secured him while Clark, fighting the glare, looked up into the sky. No, it was too close. Clark understood David's pattern. When dealing with Kryptonians, Overmen typically did not fling enemies into distant deep space. They were usually hurled toward the sun. Why had it been so near this time? Clark rocketed upward. Out in space, debris and meteorites within 10,000 miles of the blast were swept away. A body, bloodied but still alive, opened its eyes. A cold look sharpened them as he stared toward the point of Adam Captain's explosion. For someone with true immortality, a severed head would be a minor wound. Still, David's killing intent had surged by reflex. Adam Captain, however, was dead. There would be no second chance to finish him. Thanks to the immortal power I acquired, David told himself, and cried, Shazam! Lightning struck, accelerating his recovery. A purple cape and battlesuit swirled over him. He had only gained this kind of immortality days ago. Today had been close. Adam Captain was gone, but that didn't end the problem. He had been a tool, wielded by someone else. White House, David murmured. Template fusion 6 cent. Suddenly, the fusion progress spiked. David remembered the explosive light that had swept over the planet. Had Adam Captain's self-destruction, intended to drag David with him, also shone down on Earth and thrown the world into panic? The template was almost ready. This matter was not over yet. Mid-flight, Clark, who had flown out of Earth in worry, saw David standing unharmed and let out a long sigh of relief. Are you all right, David? That explosion scared me. He still sounded uneasy, his gaze lingering toward where Adam Captain had detonated. His supervision picked out the massive energy trails left between the planets like an exploded nebula, sweeping across thousands of miles. If that had gone off over Earth, It could have torn the North American continent apart. Don't worry, it's not that easy to kill me. David and Clark returned to the former site of the Justice League headquarters. The little island had been molten and had sunk beneath the waves. The headquarters is destroyed, Flash said, dejected. It's fine, we can rebuild, Hal Jordan smiled, patting Flash's shoulder. He looked toward Firestorm and Element Woman. With their help, rebuilding will be quick and it won't cost too much. Overman is back, Hawkgirl called out. Everyone looked up. David descended from above, seemingly unscathed. Major Force's face registered shock and panic. Such an attack couldn't even kill you. Where's Atom Captain? Jitong asked, stunned. He's exploded into atoms, scattered across the universe, David replied coldly. He extended a hand and bound Major Force with a gravity beam. What are you doing? You can't kill me. Major Force was pulled from Batman's hold by an invisible force. David seized him by the neck, his expression indifferent as Major Force struggled, terrified. I'm a special operative appointed by the President. If you kill me, you provoke the President and the White House. President? David tightened his grip. Metal screeched as Major Force's thick mechanical neck bent at a grotesque angle. Unlike Atom Captain, Major Force had no power to reassemble himself. He had no healing. To everyone's astonishment, he died. He was sent by the President, Green Lantern said, astonished. Is it really okay for us to kill him like this? Dangerous light leaked from Major Force's eyes and mouth like the warning of a nuclear blast. David remained impassive. With a flick of his hand, he slung the body into outer space with a gravity throw. It wasn't the dazzling, planet-spanning flash of Atom Captain's self-detonation, but a lethal blast nonetheless. Hal Jordan scratched his face, a little embarrassed. Before becoming a Lantern, he'd been one of the Air Force's best pilots. Like many soldiers, he had a different kind of respect for government and the White House. His earlier words had been concessions more than conviction. He hadn't truly believed the White House would tolerate oversight of the Milky Way. Once Earth's most powerful war machine starts targeting someone, the force it can unleash shouldn't be underestimated. The Fenrir armor hatch opened and Batman stepped out, his brow deeply furrowed. Like the League's former location, our identities can be hidden from ordinary people. But if the White House wants to investigate, finding our exact whereabouts would only take minutes. Our families. He didn't need to finish. Everyone understood. Beyond being heroes, they were people with families and loved ones. Anchors that could also be used against them. Flash's father was in prison. Aquaman's father was a retired lighthouse keeper. Element Woman's father ran a chemical conglomerate. Green Lantern had lost his parents but had a girlfriend. Batman was an orphan, but Alfred was his weakness. Even Clark couldn't be sure whether his real identity would be traced or whether his parents, Jonathan and Martha Kent, would be implicated. He looked at David. David, don't worry. That guy in the White House will soon be a thing of the past. David's face was cold as he glanced toward Washington. His words made everyone look at him sharply. Green Lantern, Flash, and others went momentarily numb. They understood what he meant. I didn't hear anything, Jitong blurted, raising her hands. She was the only non-League member present, besides the heroes, a member of the White House task force, so she had every reason to panic. David's gaze turned to her, and she grew even paler, cold sweat beading on her forehead. Her own powers offered strong self-preservation, but Overman had just killed Atom Captain, and Major Force had been taken down. She couldn't be sure whether anything would save her. Let her go, David. She was coerced by the White House. Clark spoke quickly. Do I look like someone who thirsts for blood? David had watched Jitong's lukewarm performance earlier. If this were before, I'd be sure. But now you're even preparing to take out the president. Clark's mouth pressed thin. The idea was terrifying, assassinating the leader of the most powerful nation on Earth. Don't be ridiculous. When did I ever say I was going to take out the president? David smiled. The presidential election is 4 years away. His approval ratings aren't good. His chances of re-election are slim. He will naturally become a thing of the past. They exchanged doubtful looks. It was so unlike Overman that none of them believed him, but nobody spoke. Heroes had motives too, family safety above all. The idea of a cruel criminal like Major Force being pardoned and officially sanctioned by the president, had already turned public opinion against that administration. None of them were naive about politics. Politicians could be cold and dirty. The day's ordeal had ended. Atom Captain was dead, Major Force defeated, the White House task force neutralized, though it cost them their island base. "I'll find a more secluded, secure place for the headquarters," Batman said at last. "In the meantime, support each other. Cyborg coordinates will rely on him for updates and to handle crises around the world." Despite being hunted by the White House, the Justice League's heroes would still fight to protect the world. They hadn't become heroes for official approval. This event would be seen by millions. Atom Captain's self-detonation had been visible across half the planet. Tens of millions had suffered temporary blindness from the intensity of the light. When the League released the full story through Cyborg and their official channels, discussion erupted worldwide. "This is outrageous. The heroes have saved the world time and again. This is how the United States repays them." Few defended the White House. Most of the world sympathized with the League, not only because the issue seemed right, but because dangerous actions by a single government had affected everyone. Some had already been hurt by the U.S.'s aggressive response. "The world isn't America's private property," one commenter wrote. "If the U.S. doesn't welcome the League, other nations will." The scale of Atom Captain's explosion could have torn the North American continent apart. Does the president even understand that risk? If Overman hadn't taken Atom Captain into space, we would have had the screams of hundreds of millions on Earth. Why didn't the U.S. arrest the heroes when they were saving the world? Where were Atom Captain and others when crises hit? People around the globe protested and condemned the White House's actions. Some argued the League's legality was complex, but very few defended the government. Outside the Kent farm in Smallville, David paid little attention to the online uproar. In 2 days, the Hyperion template had completely merged with him, and the system was now loading the fifth template. Fifth template loading 2%, 8%, 14%. David's eyes glowed with anticipation. If all goes well, this template should be even more powerful than Hyperion. Once the new template finished merging, he could begin dealing with the White House properly. "It isn't enough to just make someone disappear," he muttered. The existence of superpowered heroes would always be feared by governments. Killing the president was little more than an option to him, but merely replacing one person might not fix anything. If the president was assassinated right after targeting the League, the situation could become worse. He didn't only need to remove the current president, he needed to put a favorable candidate in place to settle the problem for good. Who should be the next president? A smile creased his lips. "Father's always been kind. The farm doesn't need to support us anymore. He has time to help here and there in town. Now there's a chance to help more people. He wouldn't refuse, would he?" Fifth template loading complete. Phoenix Force CN template merging 1%, 2%. Phoenix Force? The system's voice cut through David's thoughts. When the new template appeared in the feed, his pulse quickened. CN? He knew the name, though it was obscure in the larger multiverse. Beyond the famous Phoenix Force, CN was a fleeting but notable figure, once a thorn in Thanos' side and the one who finally ended him. Crucially, CN was Thanos' biological son. Before Thanos became the Mad Titan, he had drifted as a space pirate, searching for meaning. He fathered many children across the cosmos. Then, in his obsession with death, he slaughtered his former lovers and offspring. Only one descendant survived, a son born to an inhuman woman, Cian. Thanos went to great lengths to find and kill him. He assaulted the Inhuman nation, battled Black Bolt, and sent the Black Order to Earth. By then, Cian's potential had awakened, so great that Ebony Maw betrayed Thanos to pledge himself to Cian. When they finally confronted each other, Cian subdued Thanos with a single blow. David thought of Cian's powers. He raised a finger. A deep, black-purple light, an embodiment of death, snapped out and struck a row of trees. They disintegrated into ash, gone from the world. With another gesture, he targeted the stones in the forest. They decomposed into atoms. The destructive power far surpassed his heat vision. "If I'd had this when I fought Atom Captain, I wouldn't have needed so many attacks," he murmured. "My left hand is death." He raised his right hand, An orange light lanced out, and a titmouse flying in the canopy froze midair, encapsulated in a translucent orange cube, suspended as if trapped in amber. Its motion halted. "My right hand is worse than death," he whispered. The right hand power was stronger than the left. Cian had used it to defeat Thanos himself. But that wasn't the template's most important revelation. David's pupils widened with excitement. The opening words of the template flashed in his mind. Chaos and immortality, eternal yet unpredictable. The Phoenix Force, life and destruction. The Phoenix Force was one of the primal powers of the Marvel multiverse, near limitless in scope. Telepathy, teleportation, molecular decomposition, energy absorption, matter transmutation, reality reshaping. When the Force gathered, it was almost omnipotent. David felt the heat of that truth in his chest. Many had been touched by the Phoenix. Jean Grey, the White Queen, Wolverine, Cyclops, Colossus, Magic. But Jean had been its unique mirror. She had resonated with it and wielded nearly all of its power. Most others held only fragments. Cian had been one of those rare exceptions. After awakening, Cian sealed Thanos with a single blow, brought Ebony Maw to his side, and seized Thanos' empire, crowning himself Lord of the Dark Quadrant. He even managed to drive Death away from Thanos, the very being who had raised him. Under Death's guidance, Cian had found the Phoenix Force in its dormant Phoenix Egg state and merged with it, gaining what remained of that ancient power. The Phoenix was immortal. When fatally injured, it folded into a Phoenix Egg and waited for rebirth through Nirvana. From that, David inferred that even if Cian hadn't held the complete force, what he had was no less than Jean's in many respects. Thanos had cheated fate, passed the trials of the God Quarry, taken on the power of fallen cosmic gods, lured Cian to that place, and expelled the Phoenix from him before killing him. David told himself that wouldn't happen to him. The Phoenix Force in his body would not be expelled like Cian's had been. When the Cian template reached 30% fusion, something ancient and immortal ignited around David. These were not ordinary flames, but the fires of life and destruction. He hovered over the Smallville forest like a sleeping cosmic deity. The world, its living and dead, seemed to hang on a thought. He was aware of another truth. The Phoenix Force was intelligent. It could influence its hosts, corrupt them into the Dark Phoenix, or bond symbiotically. But the Phoenix nested in him felt different. It was vast, dormant, and for now, without independent will. Relief and exhilaration washed over him. A treasure had lain inside his chest. Immense, almost universe-sized, but without a mind to fight his. He did not fear the Force seizing control of him or abandoning him at whim. He was not yet its master, but the danger of mental corruption had been avoided. He closed his eyes and reached for that hunger of power. The Cian template alone would have made him formidable, comparable to Hyperion, but with the Phoenix attached, he had crossed into another league. Flames licked his skin. His strength, speed, energy manipulation, gravity control, and the peculiar gifts from Cian's template swelled. He lifted a hand, shut his eyes, and pushed his senses outward. In the solar system, the moon, Earth's ancient companion, felt the tug. For a few terrifying seconds, the moon's motion faltered, as if a colossal unseen grip had held it still. Clocks ticked, tides hesitated, space agencies around the globe screamed into their monitors as anomaly after anomaly lit up their screens. What's happening? The moon's orbit. Tidal forces are disrupted across the planet. Panic and confusion cascaded through control rooms and research centers. For billions of years, the moon had never paused. Now every gravity index read wrong. David let the hold slacken. He opened his eyes, felt the strain recoil, and released the moon. He had literally stopped it for a heartbeat by combining the Phoenix's telekinetic reach with the gravity manipulation threaded through the Cian template. Telekinesis was one of the Phoenix's most fundamental expressions. Coupling it with gravity control made the feat possible. He could hardly name himself. The surge of power gave him a deity's illusion, though he knew better. He might not be able to shatter Earth with a single blow, but he could do unimaginable damage to the moon if he wished. Then he frowned. Flames of divine lightning ran down his arms, and old power was being pushed out of him. After the Phoenix fused, another force in his chest had reacted violently, the Shazam force. Whether because the Phoenix refused to coexist with another divine current, or because the Cian template had altered the balance of his eternal blood, The result was the same. The Shazam energy was being repelled. He considered the Shazam force with something close to melancholy. It had been extraordinary, gathering the power of 6 gods, adaptable and potent. As long as a name's first letter matched Shazam's letters, a new contract could be formed to draw on its strength. But next to the Phoenix, it was a grain beside a supernova. It had helped him win many battles. He had expected it to stay with him longer, but now it was leaking away in golden sparks that singed the trees around him. The loss wasn't absolute. The Phoenix hadn't entirely negated the Shazam force's value. It had simply reduced it to a negligible fraction of his new might. Still, the separation was inevitable. David watched helplessly as occasional bolts of divine lightning flashed from his fingers, setting brush alight. He had known long before who should inherit it. Someone who'd keep it in the family, someone worthy. Clark. Shazam's power might originally have been wary of an alien, but David knew how Clark's loyalties lay. Between Krypton and Earth, Clark Kent's heart belonged to Earth and to the people who raised and loved him. The Shazam force would shore up Clark's weaknesses. Kryptonite, a red sun, even a low resistance to magic would no longer ruin him. Even if Shazam didn't make him invulnerable to everything, it would ensure he never fell to being a mere mortal. David looked toward his house, toward where Clark lived, and decided the transfer could wait. There were other tasks first. To turn those tasks into reality, he needed the wishing stone. In the original history, someone had used that stone to become president and plunged the world into chaos. The stone's wishes exacted horrible prices, manipulated by the creator, the god of lies. Yet the cost depended on who was wishing. If a god like Zeus used the stone, would the deceiver dare toy with him? David's constitution had once allowed him to outmaneuver Hades. Now, with this power, he was far stronger than the underworld king and no less than Olympus's rulers. He reached toward his bedroom. The wishing stone, kept in a box under his bed, rose of its own accord and landed in his palm. He turned it over, felt its cold depth, and then calmly tossed it once between his fingers. He spoke with deliberate control. God of lies, maker of the wishing stone, appear before me. Silence held for a breath, then a mechanical voice, far away and impersonal, cut through an entirely different night. All models have been established. Days passed. In a sunlit villa, something called Amazo completed its optimization. Hundreds of models of abilities had been compiled and harmonized so they no longer interfered with one another. For Rex, who had waited in that house with a patience that made his face almost expressionless, the completion felt like the end of a long imprisonment. Revenge was no longer a vague promise. It had a timetable. His lips curled. It's finished? Excellent. He turned toward the window where the daylight lay thick on the glass, fingers flexing as if to squeeze the sun itself. For Rex, this was more than machinery, the culmination of a plan. Lex Luthor will appear before the world again, he murmured, voice low and hungry. Overman, Superman, you will pay for what you did. Chapter 206, Doros, God of Lies. Metropolis streets roared with panic. A tall robot with gray-silver skin walked through the avenue like a judgment, spouting fierce flames from its hands and setting cars on both sides ablaze. Explosions ripped through the roadway. Metal and glass shredded and hurled into the air. People screamed, fled, some collapsed and curled over their heads. Help! Someone save us! Police! Superman! Please! 2 blocks away, on the top floor of a skyscraper, Arthur Luthor stood in a custom-tailored white suit, champagne in hand, savoring the prelude to the re-establishment of his empire. He watched the chaos with a cold smile. Burn, destroy, he murmured. They are the pawns of my enemies, worthless. High above the city, Hawkgirl beat her wings with a furrowed brow, her nth metal warhammer at the ready. After the last battle between Overman and Atom Captain, she had sent footage of Atom Captain's self-destruction back to Thanagar. Instead of letting her continue probing Overman for weaknesses, Thanagar's rulers had pulled her back. When you only have a spear, you might test it on hyenas or wolves, hoping to punch a hole in a monster's hide. Against a Tyrannosaurus, the calculus changes. The council had hesitated. They ordered Hawkgirl to go into hiding, to stop her covert hunt for Overman's weakness, and to act instead like a genuine hero, build trust with the Justice League. Thanagar and the expansionist planet Gordan were mortal enemies, their conflicts stretching across the stars. Hawkgirl had been posted to Earth under the pretext that Gordan might target the planet. Her mission had been redefined more than once, most recently to locate Overmen's vulnerability, and the last order left her uneasy. If her homeworld harbored ill intentions, she thought, she hoped they would abandon them in the face of Overmen's terrifying strength. She would rather die fighting the Gordanians than turn against the people of this planet. The thought chilled her. Could the man who protected this world truly be defeated? The question hovered as a distant explosion snapped her back to the present. She folded her wings and dove like a hunting eagle. A dull, metallic clang echoed through the street. Amazo, busy following Luther's orders of destruction, was suddenly struck on the head with a hammer and launched 10 meters. He crashed through a car and looked up, his optics locking on Hawkgirl. A millisecond scan later, his surface rippled like mercury. Nanobots rearranged, wings sprouted from his back, a warhammer formed in his hand. "Who made you?" Hawkgirl demanded coldly. Before she could get an answer, Amazo rocketed forward like an arrow. His hammer came down with crushing force and sent Hawkgirl skidding across the asphalt. The road sprayed like shrapnel, her whole body jolted with the impact. Blood trickled from the corner of her mouth. "Are you copying me?" she gasped. Amazo's newly formed warhammer swung in a monstrous arc. He moved with the exquisite efficiency of a practiced warrior, too efficient. A second earlier, he had stood like a clumsy automaton, and she had struck him easily. Now he fought like someone who had spent a lifetime in battle. Hawkgirl pressed the transmitter on her wrist to call the League as she scrambled up and struck again, nth metal flashing. As Thanagar's premier warrior, she knew how to fight, but this opponent felt different, like facing another version of herself. The hammer came at her in a storm of force that left her breathless and numb, the skin between her thumb and forefinger split and aching. Amazo used his back wings with the grace of a true hawk, soaring and turning without a hint of awkwardness. Does he mimic combat thinking as well as powers? She wondered, stunned. On the top floor of the distant skyscraper, Arthur took another sip of wine and laughed softly. "Amazo," he said to himself, "what other surprises have you been hiding?" He had worried the robot would be a clumsy instrument, vulnerable if Overman or his allies targeted it. That worry now seemed unfounded. "Hawkgirl, you all right?" he called. A blur of blue and red sliced through the sky and appeared beside them. Superman. "Be careful. This robot's not acting like any technology we've seen," Clark warned. Hawkgirl wiped blood from her mouth and stared at Amazo. She had expected Superman to arrive quickly. Metropolis was his city, after all, but she wasn't less surprised by his speed. Clark craned a shoulder, eyes narrowing as he tried to scan the robot. He wanted to find a maker's mark, a military logo, something that would explain who had built it. What he saw, though, made him frown. There were no chips, no visible circuitry, no mechanical skeleton. Amazo was composed entirely of nanobots working in perfect concert. When had Earth developed that level of nanotechnology? "Amazo," the machine said, voice flat, and turned toward Superman. "Superman, replication complete." An S identical to the one on Clark's chest formed across the robot's torso. "Putting the symbol on doesn't make you me," Clark said, half smiling, and then his fist flashed. Outside Kent Farm, in a quiet shaded copse of woods, another scene unfolded. "Esteemed Overman, Dora salutes you," a ripple of energy announced. A middle-aged man in red, courtly robes materialized among the trees. He touched his chest and inclined his head in an exaggerated, oh-so-noble bow. He looked like a bored aristocrat, languid, amused, as if he'd no trouble conjuring tragedy or comedy for his entertainment. "Doros?" David raised an eyebrow. The man in front of him was the maker of the wishing stone, the one David had summoned. "Precisely, Doros Mendacius," the man said smoothly, again touching his chest in a mock gesture of deference. He wore a smile that suggested he might be playing everyone around him like a stage. Doros's politeness was almost fawning. He had not intended to show such deference until he saw David in person. There was something about the man's bearing, an ancient, noble aura that set Doros on edge. He had read that his opponent was not a god, but standing near David made him feel the opposite, like a small cricket under the gaze of a vast, primeval beast. Even the hair on his arms was slightly raised. Are you a Greek god? David asked. I was told all the Greek gods were killed by Ares and cast back to Olympus. Not all, Doros replied easily. I kept to the shadows. I escaped Ares' slaughter. I rarely present myself to mortals. He spoke with a mixture of flattery and calculation. Esteemed Overman, Doros has heard of your renown, even in the remotest corners of the mortal world. Even Hades, king of the underworld, fell to your hand. Why have you called me? Doros's tone was more cautious, more respectful than even in the presence of Zeus. He had not intended to be so servile, but David's presence shifted him. There was something about this man that made pretense feel dangerous. David opened his mouth to answer when a sound tore the afternoon, the distant collapse of a downtown building, a crash that resonated through the trees. He turned his head. Swoosh, heat rays thick as a wrist, shot from Amazo's eyes. Clark was blasted backward, crashing through the building behind him. He staggered to his feet, heart pounding. He stared at the robot in disbelief. It actually did it. It copied my powers? At first, Amazo had simply blocked his punch, and Clark hadn't thought much of it. He'd faced enemies whose strength equaled or surpassed his before. Zod, Black Adam, Despero. But when Amazo matched his speed, radiated a bioelectric aura, and fired heat vision identical to his own, alarm flared in him. This wasn't just a strong robot. It wasn't this powerful before. Hawkgirl frowned. Superman's strength was second only to Overman in the League. If Amazo could suppress Cyborg, it shouldn't be able to shrug off Superman. It looks a lot like Parasite, she said. It absorbs abilities. Clark tightened his fists, watching Amazo and forcing himself not to rush in. Memories of Parasite crawled up, what that power could do, how dangerous it felt. Amazo's attitude toward Hawkgirl had been measured, but the second it fixed on Clark, its aggression spiked. It swung a warhammer at him with brutal force. Me? Destroy the beautiful world? Bad guy? Amazo dove like a fighter jet. Clark tried to block the heavy blows. His arms ached. Who put that idea in your head? He muttered. Amazo had already absorbed hundreds of powers. Together with Hawkgirl and Superman's strength, the robot slightly outmatched Clark, but not by much. Clark tried to reason with it. This machine had to have a creator. Who had made it, and why call him a destroyer? Bang! Hawkgirl countered from behind, smashing Amazo's shoulder with her mace. It was like hitting a mountain. Amazo brushed her off with a casual sweep of its arm. The force sent her spitting blood. Careful, its power is dangerous, Clark shouted. Need help? Hal Jordan's voice came through as a giant cushion of green solid energy caught Hawkgirl. The Green Lantern dropped into the fray and studied Amazo. A robot? He formed a massive electromagnet with his ring, trying to pin Amazo's movements. 1 second, 2 seconds, nothing. Amazo tilted its head, as if puzzled by the attempt. Hal adjusted, creating a huge flamethrower in the sky and blasting a dragon-like firestorm toward the robot. Then try this. Don't melt into a lump of iron. Amazo produced a gray-silver ring on its hand, identical in shape to Hal's Green Lantern ring. Energy corralled into a giant U-shaped conduit. The flames were funneled in, reversed, and blasted back toward Green Lantern. Hal froze. What? A red streak of lightning cut across the sky as Flash dove from a rooftop, scooping Hal and depositing him on another building. Hal, getting distracted in a fight isn't a good habit, Barry snapped. Did you see that? It conjured a lantern ring? Hal whispered, stunned. He was certain the ring had been manufactured on the spot, and its appearance didn't match the emerald glow of his own. The Green Lantern ring was the Corps' greatest weapon. Could something make one so casually? Clark, who had spotted the robot's copying ability earlier, was just as shocked. He'd assumed the ring wouldn't be copyable. He'd been wrong. Whoever made you, stop now! Civilians poured into the streets in terror. Clark clenched his jaw and tore into the sky like a cyclone. Amazo now had a lantern ring, but Superman did too, and despite the robot's additions, it hadn't pulled far ahead. He could still subdue it. Fists and feet collided high over Metropolis with thunderous impact. The shockwaves shattered windows for blocks. At first, Clark could still block Amazo's blows, but red lightning flickered across the robot's chassis as it activated the speed it had taken from Flash. Amazo surged faster, pushing Clark into a defensive struggle. What's happening? Batman arrived in the Fenrir armor and ordered Flash to help evacuate civilians while he interrogated the battlefield. Report. This thing copies people's abilities, Flash said, breathless. It didn't just copy Superman and Hawkgirl, Hal added, setting up an energy slide to evacuate people from upper floors. It copied my ring. My ring can't even identify the tech source. Copying? That's bad. Batman's voice was flat. Wonder Woman launched her lasso at Amazo, snagging one leg from a rooftop. She heaved. Amazo strained, then replicated her strength. With a brutal kick, he flung Diana across the skyline. Clark's punch met a raised Amazo hand and was held as if in a vice. The pain seared through him as a massive silver fist swelled before his vision. Bang! The blow left him dazed. It's copying everyone here, Batman barked. Superman, Wonder Woman, both taken. Firestorm, Element Woman, you two fall back, Batman ordered. Cyborg, send Overman a message. Tell him the situation. Don't rush in until we find a weakness. If we can't hold on, we'll pull him in. Firestorm's face went pale. Overman could have beaten Parasite before. Why hold him back? Because what if it copies Overman? Batman snapped. If it gets Overman's power, this world is finished. The others exchanged worried looks. They'd seen the devastation an unstoppable fight could do. Overman's battles weren't fought with city-sized safeties on. Better to be cautious than to risk a catastrophe. Amazo let out a metallic snort, and newly imbued with Diana's power, no longer struggled to gain the upper hand, but neither did it press a total victory. Is it distracted? Hal asked. He fired a Gatling torrent. Amazo barely flinched, standing with hollow eyes and returning only when Clark and Diana attacked. Flash pelted it with 1,000 punches in a blur, but caused no visible damage. I've got a bad feeling, he said, landing and leaping to another rooftop. Clark's jaw worked. After amassing power greater than theirs, Amazo's aggression had cooled. It was conserving energy, and a robot doesn't waste actions. It's not wasting energy on us. Its mind is doing something else, he said. Batman struck with the Fenrir armor, knocking Amazo back several meters. His expression hardened as he pieced things together from the robot's behavior. It's learning, iterating, he called suddenly. Get Overman to support us, now. Cyborg blinked, surprised by Batman's urgency. Batman's face was pale over the comms. Amazo's body went momentarily ethereal. 2 scorching beams passed through it without obstruction. The worst thought crystallized. Whose ability is that? Diana demanded. It's not from anyone here, Amazo said in a voice that picked over the battlefield. It belongs to a girl thousands of miles away, Ji Tong. Her ability is excellent. Amazo exhaled. Wind roared into being, an enormous hurricane that swept everyone off their feet. Skyscrapers groaned. Steel cars flipped like toys. For a terrifying instant, it felt like the end of the world. Jitong, is she here? Hal shouted against the gale. Remember, Superman has supervision, Batman ground out. It scans. If it looked at her, it could pull her power. His X-ray, his visual reach, he can scan metahumans thousands of miles away, across oceans. Does that mean? Cyborg's face went pale. If Superman's sight could be scanned, then every heroic and villainous power within his visual range was in danger. Amazo had been stealing not only what stood before him, but what Superman could see, a hemisphere-sized database of abilities. While they'd been fighting him directly, he had been quietly acquiring powers from around the globe, villains and heroes alike, stacking them in his mind and building models. Each new acquisition made him more complete. Silver began to burnish into gold along his frame. His limbs smoothed and elongated into something stately and inevitable. Clark watched, breath shallow. The power pouring off Amazo felt suffocating, godlike, far beyond the terror Atom Captain had once inspired. The League froze, small and raw in comparison. Far from Metropolis, high in a forest dozens of miles away, a man named David watched with cold, precise interest. He recognized the technology's origin at a glance. This machine was no ordinary Earth engineering. It was a level beyond Kryptonian, beyond Oa, beyond Brainiac. And yet it had been built right here, on this world. Rex Luthor, in a penthouse not far off, drained his champagne and grinned, madness bright behind his eyes. If I'm right, Amazo has found the final key to omnipotence, he muttered. Clear the way, and Rex Luthor will build an empire from this chaos. Back over Metropolis, Clark saw David, Overman, appear in the distance. He shouted through the wind. Overman, don't let him see you, he can copy. David lifted a hand as if to calm them. Amazo's gold sheen deepened. David watched with detached eyes. Even evolved into golden Amazo, he observed. He has near omnipotent power. He crushed the defenses of entire core, tossed planets into other dimensions. He's almost a god. But he added, quietly and with a certainty that cut through the roar, even as Golden Amazo, he still has an indelible weakness. Everyone warned him to leave. David did not. He hovered in midair, refusing to believe that Amazo could copy everything he could do. He knew Amazo's weaknesses. It couldn't copy what it didn't understand, and its thinking remained rigid, machine-like. Still, he didn't expect it to fail here. "Why can't I scan your abilities?" the robot asked. Amazo had swallowed up the powers of half the planet in minutes and kept evolving. Now it looked at David with the blank, godlike indifference of a mind that thought it had already conquered everything. "Other people's powers are a few bytes. I copy them instantly. You are an enormous, complex information cluster, like a universe. I can't process it," it finished. The flood of information nearly broke it. Amazo clutched its head and shut down its replication scan. Even with its enhanced intellect, it felt like a monkey trying to understand the deepest mysteries of the cosmos. Everyone watching was stunned. It had copied lantern rings, mechas, Hawkgirl's mace, even abilities of other heroes, but it could not copy Overman's power. On a distant skyscraper roof, Lex Luthor's face darkened. Amazo's admission was an anomaly he had not counted on. He ground his teeth and forced himself to think clearly. "It doesn't matter," he told himself. "I don't know why, but even without copying his power, Amazo is strong enough." David raised a hand and summoned a concentrated gravitational field to pin Amazo. He knew the Phoenix Force was something a machine could not parse. Its presence probably made him an incomprehensible whole. Amazo felt the bind, but did not panic. "I can keep evolving," it said calmly. "I only need time." Heat vision streaked from David's eyes. Amazo's hands flowed into mirrored plates and deflected the beams into the sky. "On this planet, there are hidden aliens, some more powerful than Clark. Their abilities will be mine," Amazo declared. "You will be no exception." David thought of others, Martian Manhunter for one, and of the many unexpected threats on Earth. He fired back with something different. A purple-black beam, full of an aura like death, tore into the mirror. Where a simple light beam would have been reflected, this strike punched a hole clean through. Part of Amazo's chest was annihilated, leaving a crater. The silver body rippled like molten metal and reformed in seconds. "I copied all the immortality, regeneration, and healing programs I could find," Amazo said flatly. "You cannot terminate me." It swelled into a colossal golden colossus, as tall as a skyscraper, cold and remote. It reached for David like a god taking a step. David's left hand spat a dissolving death beam that chewed through steel, but on a form that size it barely nicked the surface. With each movement, Amazo made a wind that toppled buildings. David detonated his fists against the robot's palm. The impact sent Amazo reeling. It knocked down several blocks, but David stood his ground. "Evacuate the city," he ordered. The ground shuddered, dust billowed, and the heroes below moved fast. Clark, Batman, Diana, Flash, aware this fight would level whole neighborhoods. Amazo's vast bulk made it slow. It threw heavy punches and created hurricanes, but missed. Then in an instant, the giant shimmered out of existence. The city looked up in terrified confusion. Where had it gone? David's eyes tracked a barely visible speck trying to slip into his nostril, Amazo, having downsized to microscopic proportions to escape. He pinched it between two fingers. "A robot will use any means," he murmured, studying it. "Why destroy the city and target Superman?" Amazo's memory fragments flickered in its mind. It had been provoked to attack the Justice League, and after defeating them it had gone into space, copying abilities across the universe. Someone had lied to it when its mind was young. "Someone deceived me when I was immature," Amazo said. With the superbrain it now had, it had read through almost every public memory it could access. Luthor's clumsy manipulation had been obvious. Luthor, persistent as a ghost. David's gaze sliced through the city. He found Luthor, no longer the original, but a contingency clone, crouched in a high rise. The sight made the clone falter. Hatred had blinded him. In focusing on Overman, he had overlooked Amazo's own growth and awareness. Luthor made a break for it. David flicked a finger and an amber streak lashed across blocks, through glass, and froze Luthor mid-stride, sealed as if trapped in polished amber. His face froze in terror and despair, trapped motionless while his mind still turned, the living equivalent of a slow, eternal torment. David looked away. He's not important anymore, he said under his breath. Amazo, still held between David's fingers, remained either calm or incapable of fear. It sent a golden wave of force, shook loose, and popped back to full size. I see the next step in evolution in you, it said. Some scientists get excited when they meet an insurmountable problem. My reactions are similar. That's been said to me before, David replied coolly, and raised a spear of divine lightning. Brainiac had once targeted him for the same reason: unique physiology, unique potential. Amazo dodged, and then it did something baffling. It didn't try to absorb or neutralize the lightning. It simply dodged, again and again. This is different, Amazo's voice crackled. This energy, it is divine. It is magic. No matter how strong its muscles, no matter how many powers it had copied, it could not analyze the unknowable rules of magic. Magic and divine power were full of hidden rules and consequences that could twist reality instantly. Amazo could copy a lantern ring or a hammer because those were predictable tools. It couldn't parse the phoenix-driven hand of magic. It treated even a trace of it as a threat it could not risk touching. Below, the heroes watched, puzzled. Batman's mind clicked pieces into place. Amazo had copied Hawkgirl's mace, Green Lantern's ring, and Batman's mechas, but never Diana's lasso of truth. He had missed a blind spot. If I'd learned magic, Diana said regretfully. Two of them attacking its weakness might have toppled the robot earlier. But even that might not have produced what David was doing. This wasn't just any magic trick. Amazo's caution was amplified because David himself, suffused with the Phoenix Force, was an incomprehensible whole. That incomprehensibility increased Amazo's weighting of risk. It became hyper-cautious to the point of paralysis. Every time David attacked with powers it couldn't model, it dodged rather than striking back. David kept pressuring it. His attacks forced Amazo to retreat and dodge, unable to analyze the magic in time. The robot's calculations flickered. It tried intangibility, its most used defense, phasing away from blows. David's body crackled with tightly packed divine lightning, and alongside it launched a slender orange beam that moved like frozen time, an almost surgical, singular line without the lightning's crackle. Amazo ran the numbers in milliseconds. The odds of dodging every one of Overman's attacks were under 1%. The chance its machine defenses could endure that orange, time-congealing light, and the incomprehensible attacks at the same time was 84.6%. Its conclusion was grim but clear. The only way out was to take the living hell light directly. David had used that power before. He had solidified Luther, dented Amazo. Now he unleashed it fully. The amber-like light struck, and it didn't just mark a wound. It enveloped Amazo completely. The ultimate life form, the product of countless copied powers and near divinity, stopped thinking. It was like someone flicked a switch and paused its mind, neither dead nor alive, locked in a stasis that was a kind of time bottle. David hovered before the translucent, upright cube. Inside, the robot's motions and thoughts were frozen like insects in amber. He tapped the surface, considering, and said, "But he is no longer important now." Chapter 209, Darkseid, 4K2. When the great battle finally subsided, the heroes gathered above the city. "Is he dead?" Green Lantern asked, looking at David with a trace of lingering fear. Amazo, encased in an amber-like cube, looked intact, more trapped than destroyed. "No, he's alive," David said, "but it's as good as dead." Clark stepped forward to examine the cube carefully, but could discern nothing unusual. He looked back at David with curiosity. This was another powerful ability David had displayed that Clark had never seen before. "He won't break free and run out again?" Firestorm hesitated. Batman and the others shared the concern. They had all witnessed Amazo's terrifying power. He had copied the abilities of countless metahumans. Even standing still, Amazo had felt like a higher dimensional presence, an aura that made it hard to breathe. "Absolutely not," David said firmly. "His thoughts are frozen along with his time." The crystal David had formed using the light of the living hell was not particularly strong physically. In earlier fights with Amazo, David had used it several times both to paralyze and to attack him, but he couldn't seal Amazo's limbs permanently. Amazo had broken those seals with little effort. "The strength of the living hell crystal isn't its durability," David explained. "Its power is that it stops thought." If he wants to break the seal, he first has to be able to conceive the idea. Thought is essential to life, especially for a robot. David looked at the trapped Amazo. As long as no one forces this cube open from the outside, he's nothing but an ornament. Although the living hell cube couldn't forcibly restrain Amazo forever, it was still strong enough that even Clark wouldn't easily break it. The others breathed a little easier, but they weren't entirely at rest. Where did this robot come from anyway? Flash asked, the question that had nagged everyone. One person should be able to answer that, David said, and with a flick of his hand, another similar cube flew from a distant building. Clark recognized the terrified figure inside. Rex? He's still alive? Rex's reappearance, someone who should have been dead, shocked them. Many of the heroes knew of him. He had once broadcast his death at Overman's hands to the whole world. Green Lantern began a comment about cloning and ghosts, but stopped. The subject of superheroes killing people was sensitive. David didn't bother with delicacy. By chance, he stirred up trouble. David guessed the course of events had probably followed the familiar pattern. Rex had discovered Amazo early in its existence and thought he could use the robot for revenge and ambition. David dissolved the cube, and Rex's body finally moved again. You defeated Amazo? How is that possible? Rex gasped, bewildered. To have only one's consciousness moving while the body felt immobile was a living nightmare. He looked at David with disbelief. David shrugged. Nothing's impossible. It's just another scheme by someone who wanted to destroy and rule the world. Hasn't Overman foiled enough buffoons like you? Firestorm snorted, looking at the freedman. Overman had saved the Earth more than once. When he appeared, crises seemed to resolve. Tell us where this robot came from, he demanded. Diana tossed her lasso of truth around Rex. Under its divine compulsion, he could not lie. Rex quickly revealed everything he knew. Amazo was the posthumous work of a deceased Earth scientist. The revelation left everyone surprised and, to some extent, relieved. A scientist capable of building such a robot and we've barely heard of him? Flash said, scratching his head. At least there's no mastermind out there pulling the strings, Batman observed quietly. He, David, and Clark had battled Brainiac's invasion before. Compared to that, Brainiac, Cyborg Superman, and copy-capable Amazo felt a step down, still dangerous, but not some omniscient puppet master. Perhaps there wasn't a looming conspiracy beyond this creation. What should we do with Rex? Green Lantern asked. No, don't kill me, Rex pleaded, his voice high and frantic. David's gaze alone made him flinch. This Rex was a poor shadow of the cunning, resolute man some remembered. David's expression was cold. With a single movement, he unleashed a sweep of purple-black light of purple. The light engulfed Rex. Annihilation followed. He vanished without a trace. Rex had hardly been the true mastermind of the disaster. At most, he had triggered events in motion. Still, he was gone now. There won't be another cloned Rex popping up, David said to Clark. Should we have Cyborg investigate Rex's activities before he died? Clark, worried, leaned toward David. Rex had interacted with civvies and even with Clark's adoptive parents. That made the whole thing uncomfortable. Don't worry about Lex Luthor crawling out of some dark corner again. I'll make sure he's thoroughly dead this time, David replied, waving a hand. There were other matters waiting. Another summoned god in the farm's woods required him. No sooner had the Amazo incident settled and the Justice League revealed that a deceased Lex Luthor had been implicated, stirring debate about cloning, than something even more sensational occurred. Oh my God, the president has been assassinated. After lunch, Martha sat on the sofa, shocked, watching emergency news on TV with her hand over her mouth. Jonathan, who'd been finishing chores, rushed in at the sound. The anchor reported in a stunned tone. The president had just finished a press conference about the Super Task Force and Atom Captain. As he was about to leave, a man in a gray jacket among the invited journalists had pulled out a shotgun, shot the president in the chest, leaving a massive wound, then fired again into his head, killing him instantly. The report went on to question how the president's bodyguards had allowed someone posing as a journalist to bring a shotgun into the venue. The death was brutally reminiscent of a previous assassination. Clark's first reaction was to glance at David. Why are you looking at me? You don't think that killer on TV is me, do you? David, lounging on another sofa, spread his hands and chuckled. The assassin was arrested. He turned out to be a mental patient with a decade-long history who'd escaped a New York institution a few days ago. When asked why he killed the president, he said he'd heard on TV that the president liked mayonnaise on his bread and that he couldn't stand it. The family in front of the television stared speechless at the absurd motive. David stood. "Father, now that the president is dead, do you have any thoughts?" Jonathan blinked. "Thoughts? I'm a farmer. I don't care much for politicians. I've dealt with plenty of incompetent, greedy officials. I'm not sad, just stunned." David spread his hands. "Remember, the election is coming. Don't you want to do something?" Jonathan laughed in disbelief. "Me? Run for president? I'm a Kansas farmer. I've got no backing, no money. State senator is out of reach." Clark was more surprised than anyone. He knew David wouldn't ask on a whim. "Father? President Father?" The idea sounded absurd, but Jonathan surprised himself. He had always wanted to help people. David waved his hand. "If you want it, none of that will be a problem. Even God would hope the leader of this country is a kind, enthusiastic person, someone like you, even if he started life as a rural farmer." Far away, in the dark expanse of the Milky Way, aboard a grotesque, mountain-sized warship, a different conversation was taking place. "My son is dead." Darkseid sat high on an iron throne, his stone-like skin and imposing bulk casting a shadow over the chamber. He rested his hands beneath his chin, his voice deep and majestic. "Though I never liked Kalibak, he was my son." Before him stood the two senior officials still loyal from Apocalypse, Darkseid, the chief scientist, and Granny Goodness, captain of Darkseid's personal guard. Granny Goodness, with white hair and a bloated, ferocious face, held a long metal staff. She had once trained the female Furies and, in a fit of ruthless devotion, had killed her own superior rather than allow harm to the hounds she'd raised, an act that had brought her to Darkseid's notice. If Kalibak had heard these words in life, he would have rejoiced, Granny Goodness said with malicious satisfaction. "The female Furies I trained will tear your enemies apart." Darkseid bowed and feigned a sigh. Kalibak had always craved his father's approval. Yet he knew Darkseid's true purpose, Earth. After so many years, they had again obtained the planet's coordinates. "Congratulations, great Dark Lord. After so long, you have the coordinates of that world. Your long-awaited wish will soon be fulfilled." "Anti-life equation," Darkseid intoned. At the word, his eyes flared red. The Omega effect thrummed like a coiled weapon, eager to be unleashed. Darkseid, the belligerent, brutal lord of Apocalypse, who had once slain his brother Drax and claimed the Omega effect, spoke of the equation like a god speaking of destiny. "Light and dark are woven through the universe," he said. "The life equation suffuses all things. The anti-life equation is its opposite, the ultimate power, the sum of all things inverted. With it, I can conquer the universe. All life will obey my will." He clenched a fist as if holding that power in his palm, the ability to twist and corrode thought and will, to make every creature live at his command. The Omega effect and the anti-life equation are linked. Long ago, I glimpsed the Omega symbol at the heart of the anti-life equation. The equation waits for me, who bears the Omega effect, on that planet called Earth. The two below him fell silent, fearful. Darkseid's only defeat had been at Earth. When he was still a prince, he invaded and was repelled by a coalition of old gods and other forces, losing even Apocalypse's supreme treasure, the Mother Box. That was his humiliation. This time, what you desire will be achieved. No one can stop you now. Darkseid bowed, hedging praise with flattery, sped the ship to full speed. Darkseid rose, his massive form casting an impenetrable shadow. His presence was a force that made the stars seem to tremble. "The one who killed Kalibak, I will make him suffer before his death. Then I will cleanse that world. I will burn Earth to ash and reveal the anti-life equation fully." His voice carried the inevitability of an approaching doom. Woo! In the Arctic, bitter winds swept across the ice and snow surrounding the Fortress of Solitude. The mournful keening of the gale sounded like ghosts wandering the frozen tundra. Inside the fortress, Clark was once again using the ship's observation systems to check on his cousin, Kara Zor-El, to see how she was faring on Earth. On the screen, a tall, slim blonde woman in office attire walked along a modern city street. With square-framed glasses, she glanced up at the sky, then pushed through a revolving door and entered the building where she worked. After Hel tried to destroy the sun, Kara was deceived and nearly became an accomplice. She moved out of our house and we lost contact, Clark sighed, explaining it to the holographic Jor-El. Clark understood the guilt that likely drove her. How could she face the Kents after what nearly happened? The more they welcomed her, the heavier that guilt would feel. So she left alone and vanished. She seems to be adapting quite well to life on Earth, the AI Jor-El observed. Kryptonians were extinct in the universe. If Kara wanted to survive, she would have to live among humans. Exposed to a yellow sun, a Kryptonian's abilities made assimilation far easier, and her intelligence only helped. Seeing his cousin find a clerical job, blend in, and avoid obvious threats gave Clark some small comfort. I hope one day she can understand and come back, Clark said softly. I never blamed her. She was deceived. Her planet and family were destroyed, and then she woke up on a strange world. I'd have been tempted to leave everything behind, too. A sudden tremor shook the ship. Dust sifted down from the ceiling. What's wrong? Clark asked, looking around. The ship's systems are detecting a massive energy signature, Jor-El replied, bringing up a hologram. On the screen, the mother box kept in a secure chamber vibrated, sending out rippling waves of energy that rattled the cabin. The mother box is acting up. Clark's muscles tightened. After David, he, and the League had stopped Apocalypse invasion last time, the three mother boxes had been split and entrusted to Paradise Island, Atlantis, and the Fortress. They were dead after David killed Calabac, Clark said. Why would one suddenly react? A signal has linked to it, Jor-El answered, looking skyward. The signal is external to Earth. Clark's mind shot to one name, Darkseid. The thought that the Lord of Apocalypse would come for Earth to avenge a son or to claim the planet's secrets and power was chillingly plausible. He activated superspeed and reached the mother box chamber, but it was too late. The air tore open, a boom tube. A towering figure stepped through the portal, hands clasped behind his back. His presence felt like a mountain moving. A fierce wind slammed into Clark, and he instinctively braced. Darkseid scanned the room with cold indifference. Kneel, or be reduced to ash by my Omega beams, he announced, inhaling Earth's air as if savoring it. His voice carried the contempt of an unconquerable tyrant. Granny Goodness and Darkseid followed, the former carrying an iron staff, both barking orders. You have no choice. Clark met Darkseid's gaze, and something in that look felt like the screams of 1,000 worlds. He didn't flinch. He charged, striking out with a desperate punch. A massive gray hand closed over his arm as if catching a fly, and Clark was hurled across the cabin like a rag doll. He slammed into the floor, denting the steel into a deep crater. Your Majesty, the ship's artificial intelligence tried to communicate with the outside world, Darkseid reported, manipulating a wrist display. I blocked the signal. Deal with it, Darkseid said without turning. Darkseid's parademons injected a tailored virus into the ship's systems. Jor-El's hologram tried to move. Clark, hurry, and then the image convulsed as if corroded by red lava. The likeness twisted and collapsed into nothing. No, Clark shouted. He didn't know whether a machine-made copy of his father could be called his real father, but it was all he had left of his parents. Darkseid's lip curled in amusement. Interesting, he said, as if reading Clark's private memories. An infant from Krypton adopted by simple farmers, raised on this world. You killed my son. You defeated Mantis and Steppenwolf. A cold, red glow flared in Darkseid's eyes. It stabbed into Clark like twin beacons from a foggy shore. The Dark Lord's voice echoed, both from the room and inside Clark's head. Surrender to me, son of Krypton. Clear the way for my conquest. Something blackened in Clark's mind. His expression went blank, as if a darkness settled over him. Then, with an explosive roar, he shot through the fortress's hull, punched through the atmosphere, and streaked toward home, breaking the sound barrier. You will stall him. Go retrieve the remaining mother boxes, Darkseid commanded. With the Omega effect at his command, his power extended far beyond simple beams, molecular reshaping, soul manipulation, psyches bent to his will. Controlling millions of minds was effortless to him, but he wanted complete domination. For that, he needed the anti-life equation. Yes, Your Majesty. Darkseid acknowledged, and parademons swarmed through the boom tube. Granny Goodness led out the female Furies. They dispersed toward the coordinates of the other mother boxes. Darkseid drifted out into the Arctic storm, hands behind his back. The howling blizzard lashed his volcanic, rock-like skin. "I do not like this place," he muttered. The cold, pale Arctic was the antithesis of apocalypse, lava and toxins under an angry sky. He unleashed thick, red omega beams that struck the ice. Terrifying heat surged, ancient ice and snow melted and instantly vaporized. The white of the Arctic turned dark red from orbit. The frozen ground split, magma welled, and sulfurous steam billowed into the air. Parademons howled in delight, pouring through open warps into Earth's cities. "For His Majesty Darkseid," they screamed. At the Kent farm, David was chopping wood when the sky convulsed. He frowned and looked up. A streak tore a path from the North Pole to the continent. The air itself seemed ripped apart. The earth shuddered, and dirt and stone blasted skyward. Clark slammed into the ground nearby, standing up with a grim, empty look. "Stay inside, Mom and Dad," he barked. The sound shook Jonathan and Martha out of the house. David felt the wrongness in Clark like a physical blow. He'd never seen that soulless, furious look, like a machine set to kill. "Clark, what's wrong?" he asked, stepping forward, instincts honed by years of shared danger. Without warning, Clark swung at him, a strike full of killing intent. David raised a hand and absorbed the blow, but the blast ripped up the turf and shattered the farmhouse windows. He caught Clark's arm easily, as if holding a child. Jonathan and Martha's lantern rings flared, protective shields glowing around them. The couple stood helpless and terrified as Clark pressed his attack. "Clark," Martha cried, "is it red kryptonite again?" Jonathan whispered, recalling a similar dark episode from the past, until he saw Clark's eyes. The darkness in them wasn't the chaotic haze of red kryptonite. This was cold, uniform, deliberate. "This is worse," David said. "Snap out of it, Clark." David shouted and drove a punch that sent Clark hurtling like a cannonball toward Metropolis. David's attention snapped out beyond the farm then. The sky was filled with parademons swarming every city. Metropolis, Gotham, Central City, Fawcett City. The sound of flapping wings was like locusts. Buildings were pierced, streets ran with panic. "They're back! Aliens from Apocalypse," someone screamed. David's eyes narrowed. The global attack and Clark's strange behavior could only mean one thing. Darkseid was here. He chased Clark at impossible speed, but first he had to stop the parademon onslaught. With a pressure wave of raw power, David swept over Metropolis. The creatures were torn apart, vaporized into bloody mist by a crushing gravitational field. A howling golden globe, the massive Earth sculpture atop the Daily Planet, was hurled like a catapult. David sidestepped as it smashed through several towers and detonated in another block. "You need to be corrected, David." Clark's voice sliced through the chaos as he reappeared, charging with inhuman speed, throwing a punch charged with a force that made the air itself quake. Chapter 211, Bug, you are provoking an existence you do not understand. The city was a screaming chaos, thousands crying, running, dead or dying in the wake of the brief but devastating parademon assault. Metropolis had been cleared of the flying terrors for the moment, but the damage was done. "Correction?" David asked, staring at Clark as if testing whether he'd heard right. "Serve Darkseid, and count it an honor to carry out his will." Clark bellowed, then lunged. The air itself coughed as his fist drove forward, raw power pouring from him. Darkseid's invasion of his mind had amplified Clark's strength into something bestial, feral, indiscriminate, utterly relentless. The blow landed with a thunderclap, but it was like swinging at a mountain. Clark's punch was no match for David. Their fists met, and Clark was thrown back, as if gripped by an unstoppable hand, carving a deep groove through the asphalt with his trajectory. Pain exploded through his body. His bones felt rattled to splinters. He scrambled up, eyes wild with ferocity, and prepared to charge again. A lightning-fast cable whipped out and looped around his waist. Green motes of light bloomed and braided into heavy chains. Massive metal stakes rose from the ground, intent on pinning him in place. Clang! The chains tightened. In the sky, Hal Jordan fought the pull of the lantern ring, muscles straining. Diana dug her powerful legs into the pavement, each step forcing grooves into the road. Just as Clark surged forward, a localized gravitational field slammed down, dragging him earthward. His forward momentum ripped away, and he was sucked back as if a giant hand had yanked him by the collar. The two men hovered inches apart, face to face, suspended by opposing forces. David hovered, palms up, studying the tormented Clark. He looks like he's being controlled, someone said. Batman descended in his Fenrir armor with a crash of metal. What's our move? He asked. The invasion from Apocalypse had spread like a plague. No corner of Earth was exempt. Batman, Cyborg, and Wonder Woman had raced to Metropolis when the readings spiked, knowing David would be here. David had no easy answer. He lifted his palm and looked into Clark's anguished face. I didn't want to do this, Clark. You've made Mom and Dad suffer. I have to try something. A white-green aura flared as David simulated kryptonite radiation with his lantern ring. Clark's skin drained of color. Agony flared inside him like a burning star. Veins stood out on his throat and brow as his powers flared and then collapsed. He crumpled, the gravity suddenly heavy, helpless. His scream carried, raw, pained, animal. David edged closer, intensifying the radiation for a moment more. Clark's feral look softened, the darkness in his eyes receding as consciousness fought through the pain. Within seconds, the transformation was unmistakable, pale, sweating, shaking, but clearer. Pain brings clarity, David said. Clark blinked and rasped, yes, yes. He shook his head hard, fighting whatever filth had slithered into his mind. Darkseid's influence wasn't perfect. He had exploited Clark's emotional swings, but he hadn't, somehow, fully broken him. Seeing him come round, David withdrew the kryptonite glow, reached down and hauled the weakened Kryptonian upright, then pointed north. Get some sun. There's going to be a major battle. I think Darkseid's already brought pawns to seize the mother boxes. Reinforcements arrived in a scatter of motion. Firestorm, Element Woman, Hawkgirl, Flash, Arthur. Sweat beaded on Clark's brow. He's powerful, Clark warned. I felt no resistance when he had me. David needed no further reminder. He was the one in the group who understood Darkseid's nature best, the mightiest new god, an engine of despair whose vast legions had conquered worlds. No rhetoric could make him appear less terrible. Split up, Paradise Island and Atlantis. Darkseid sent forces there. We can't let them get the mother boxes. The 3 mother boxes together could cleanse the Earth, David explained. Darkseid needs them to fully activate the anti-life equation hidden on this planet. The anti-life equation could force every living being into submission. Darkseid craved it, even if he had no interest in playing ruler himself. On Earth, he had come searching. The equation isn't just written on the surface of the Earth. It needs a specific, powerful energy to be awakened. Darkseid and the mother boxes together can do it. My power alone can't draw it out, at least not in the way he would. Paradise Island? Diana's face tightened. My mother, everyone, could be in danger. We'll go with you, Element Woman said instantly. Split into 2 teams and move now. David hung in the air, looking over the assembled heroes. Batman watched him for a beat, then spoke flatly when he realized David planned to move separate from the Mother Box teams. The Mother Boxes are one objective, but they aren't the only tool Darkseid has. I'm going to the North Pole to find Darkseid. David's jaw tightened. If Darkseid gets desperate or tempted by the anti-life equation, he might act without using the Mother Boxes. If he moves straight for a surface activation, the entire world is in jeopardy. Clark had already flown to the sun and back, refueled and renewed. He drifted in, cape snapping, and said seriously, I'll go with you. David accepted. This mission held the gravest stakes. If Overman and Superman failed, no one else could stand against Darkseid. Batman's voice dropped. We're counting on you, he said, looking directly at David. There isn't much time. Go. David and Clark rocketed north. On Paradise Island, a massive craft folded down from the sky. Granny Goodness disembarked, flanked by her personally trained female Furies. Across from them, the Amazons had mounted and formed ranks, their armor gleaming on horseback. Granny Goodness jabbed a steel-topped staff at Queen Hippolyta. Amazons, hand over the Apocalypse Mother Box, she commanded. Lashina cracked a whip charged with electricity. Bernadette wore a green court dress and a cruel smile, her dagger flickering like a candle flame. Stompa's bulk made her look like a living battering ram. Mad Harriet's wild eyes and hooked claws promised madness. Guillotina held a blade with clinical calm. Each Fury radiated menace. No one the Amazons had ever faced was like them. You will never take the Mother Box, Hippolyta declared, voice a low thunder. Kill them. Kill them all. Granny Goodness's voice was a sharpened thing. Her parademons surged forward beneath the onslaught of the female furies. Beneath the waves, Darkseid stood on a hovering disk above Atlantis, smug and imperious. The city's shields repelled the crashing ocean, but he only waved once, and the parademon ranks, fitted with aquatic thrusters, dove into the water. "Destroy this city. Find our mother box," he intoned. Mera, her father Nereus, and the Atlantean legions braced. "For the sea!" Nereus screamed, spear raised, as Atlantean riders on sharks and leviathans charged. "Annihilate these invaders!" Above the North Pole, the landscape had become unrecognizable. Clark's face drained of color. The ice world of legend had been reshaped. Rivers of molten rock coursed where glaciers had been. Sulfur-choked vapor spat from fissures. "Someone didn't like the old arrangement up here," Clark muttered. At the ruins of the Fortress of Solitude, a tall, terrible figure waited, hands clasped behind his back, eyes like coals. He watched them with utter contempt, as if two flies had dared buzz beneath his nose. "You killed my son?" Darkseid's voice rolled out, cold and amused. "I recall the people of this planet call you Overman." David met the god of Apocalypse without a tremor. The contempt between them was a physical thing. "You think you can crush me?" he said. "After today, it may not be only your son who dies by my hand." Darkseid's face curved into a slow, disdainful smile. "Insect, you are provoking an existence you do not understand." His eyes ignited with the red flare of the Omega effect. The beams shot forward like living judgment. "When my Omega effect turns you to charcoal," he sneered, "I will keep your skull as a footstool beneath my throne, a memorial to my dead son." Darkseid had sent his most capable lieutenants after the Mother Box, leaving only an endless horde of parademons and hovering warships over the North Pole. Still, that did nothing to diminish the Dark Lord's presence. His entire being radiated the authority of life and death, the power to give and to take, and two Omega beams seared out from his eyes in quick succession. The heat-scorched rays twisted through the air, tracking their targets relentlessly. "Get out of the way!" David shouted. Omega beams were no ordinary energy blasts. They locked onto their marks and annihilated utterly, leaving nothing to return. Every hair on Clark's arms rose as he became a streak of motion, ducking aside. The two beams split. One chased Clark like a dog on a bone. David raised a palm and unleashed a purplish-black death ray. The two Omega beams smashed into it, annihilation clashing with eradication, and they canceled one another out. For a dozen centimeters, the Omega beams fought the black column of light, then lost momentum and died away. Clark moved like an impossibly agile fighter jet, twisting and diving through waves of parademons, performing dazzling aerial maneuvers, but the beam dogged him. His eyes flashed red, reflecting the single-minded hunger of a god of death that would not rest until its target was ended. The purplish-black pillar that had been holding the sky dissolved the pursuing ray. Having pulled Clark from immediate danger, David swung his attention to Darkseid. A crushing gravitational field snapped into place around the towering figure, an oppressive weight like a planet crashing down. Darkseid could no longer stand with his casual hands behind his back posture. His knees buckled, the ground beneath him cracked and splintered in a web of fractures for nearly 100 meters. He glared up. Changing gravity? In an instant, the field shattered. Darkseid hovered, massive as a celestial body, and with a single clenched gesture, he transformed gravity into a weapon, dragging at David like a living black hole. "With the Omega effect under my command, gravity is my plaything," he thundered. Mountains trembled. The pull yanked David forward uncontrollably only a few meters at first, then accelerated him along the force. He slammed into Darkseid and punched, throwing the god several miles. Darkseid's colossal form slammed through a mountain peak and embedded itself deep in the rock. Wiping a smear of blood from his mouth, he scowled. "You think tugging on gravity will make me lose balance?" David's eyes flared and he fired thick heat rays. Darkseid raised a massive palm to shield himself. The scorching altered his expression for a heartbeat. "Let me sober you up," David warned. "Underestimating me could cost you your life. Who are you to stand shoulder to shoulder with the Lord of Apocalypse? You're nothing but an unknown pawn." Darkseid spat. As if to answer, he seized a shattered mountain, millions of tons of rock, and hurled it at David like a flaming meteor. David punched the mass apart, debris scattered. From the cloud of rubble, a titanic, demon-like arm slammed down, punching David into the earth with a force that made the entire North Pole shudder. Boulders the size of millstones and trucks exploded outward like shrapnel, roaring through the sky. Clark fought in the thick of the parademons, watching the massacre. Limbs flew, some enemies pulverized into dust. The parademons were expendable to Darkseid, mere consumables. With savage momentum, Darkseid bore down into the pit, intent on pressing his advantage. "Good, this is getting interesting," he rumbled. Death rays launched David back out of the pit. He burst upward and met Darkseid again. Their fists and feet collided, tearing through the atmosphere and shaking the Arctic landmass. After feeling David's power firsthand, Darkseid abandoned his kingly composure. The impact of their blows unleashed rolling waves of force, a tangible white tide sweeping across the polar sky. Clark watched the duel in stunned awe. Though he moved freely through the parademon ranks, no one could withstand a single blow from him. Yet, in the brief span of their battle, the parademons David had personally killed were fewer than the number crushed by the collateral damage of the godfight. David and Darkseid fought from sky to ground, shattering mountains, buckling the earth, and ripping the atmosphere apart for thousands of miles. "Overman," Darkseid said at last, eyes burning with renewed effort. "Your strength merits my attention." His gaze snapped red as Omega beams flared again, forcing David back. His voice rolled like thunder. "Kneel, beg my forgiveness. Submit to me, Darkseid. Conquer 10,000 worlds for me in the universe, and I, as a god, might absolve you." Darkseid regarded even Kalibak's death as no more than a slight. He believed this challenge similarly insignificant. "You still haven't got it?" David answered. "You dream I'll submit to you?" David lifted a hand. A mountain and sea-sized surge of telekinesis seized Darkseid's limbs, hoisting him and locking him in place. Coupled with a powerful gravity field, enough to pin a planet, Darkseid grunted as though 4 planet-sized warships were wrenching at his bones. "You don't understand the power of a god." He strained. Darkseid snarled. Omega beams, hotter and harder than before, bent and tore from his eyes. One struck David's chest like a falling star. David flew back, blood spattering his mouth. His chest was a smoking ruin as he was cast off the North Pole in an instant. "I had planned to conserve my power in case the mother box had been damaged in the millennia it was lost," Darkseid said, now unleashed. Red light flared from his eyes, and the Omega effect ignited his fists. He hurtled after David like a blazing meteor. "You forced my hand. Be proud, Earth insect." Cosmic energy within David flared, amplifying his body. He met Darkseid again in a collision that detonated across the sky. Both were flung back. Darkseid righted himself, still fierce as ever. His rock-like physique, already altered and hardened by the Omega effect, showed almost no injury. Born a god and remade by Omega power, his body was now harder than many stellar cores. David's blows that once left dents now did little. In a breath, David was flung thousands of miles, arms badly scorched by Omega fire, clearly disadvantaged. "David!" Clark called, circling through the parademons. He could see the injuries. Despite knowing of David's immortal healing, worry tightened his voice. "I'm fine," David whispered, knowing Clark could hear. He checked his hands. The wounds were severe, Omega force gnawing at him like a parasite, trying to disintegrate him from within. Yet when the alien energy invaded, something inside him answered. Immortal energy blazed up from his core like wildfire, pushing the Omega force back. His wounds knit at a visible speed. He narrowed his eyes and looked up. "Darkseid, is that all you've got?" "Disappointing." "What?" Darkseid bellowed, aghast. "No one has ever spoken to me like that." From second Prince of Apocalypse to the god who made the universe tremble, no one had dared provoke him so brazenly. Enraged, Darkseid threw the Omega force through his body in a tide of destructive light. Even David's gravity and telekinesis bent and groaned. Straining against the planet-stabilizing hold, Darkseid plowed forward with terrible momentum, an attack charged with Omega energy capable of tearing the jaw from a skull. "Let me see all your power," David called, advancing with a raised fist. "Push me to my limit. When I rip your jaw off, we'll see if you can still talk tough," Darkseid shouted. His fury blew like a volcanic storm. Meteoritic blows rained down. Though David countered with telekinesis and gravity to slow him, he was outmatched in raw force. Omega beams flashed from Darkseid's eyes, skewing trajectories and forcing David into retreat after retreat. Their clash ripped oceans and shred the atmosphere as the two streaks of energy raced past the Arctic Circle. People around the globe, some fighting off parademons, looked up and stared as two meteors of light cut the sky, leaving space-rippled energy in their wake. "What is that?" voices muttered. "The purple one. Overman? He's losing. Is that the ruler of the invaders?" Compared to Darkseid's Omega power, the cosmic energy David drew on was small. Darkseid's voice returned to cold, imperial condescension as he used David's true name to unsettle him. David had taken hit after hit, but something was changing. As the Omega Force repeatedly tried to invade the host of the Phoenix, a different force answered. Suddenly, David raised a hand and for the first time parried one of Darkseid's frontal strikes cleanly. Darkseid's eye twitched. After sweeping across half a planet, this was the first time his direct attack had been stopped, and only by one hand. "Regret? I should be thanking you," David said. Unseen until now, a corona of ancient, crackling phoenix fire erupted and wrapped his entire body, radiating an aura of ruin and renewal both. Chapter 213, Beyond Everything, Final Chapter. This power? Darkseid's eyes widened. The presence before him felt ancient and absolute, an aura of finality and rebirth that carried the weight of death itself. It resembled his Omega Force, yet there was something different inside that likeness, an undercurrent of immortal life, as if two aspects of a supreme deity had been braided together, one to grant eternity, the other to annihilate it, destruction and eternity intertwined. What kind of power could that be? They hovered in the sky while people on the ground craned their necks. A sound like a phoenix's cry split the air as the Phoenix Force flared. David ignored the shocked crowd below and drove a fist into Darkseid, blasting him backward. Energy bloomed like a supernova, light and heat erupting outward. People screamed, ducked, and shielded their eyes as a hurricane of air swept across the island. A scorched mark seared Darkseid's thick chest. He spat blood, glaring down. The burning energy clung to his wound, trying to unravel him. David believed Darkseid now felt what he had felt. One of the Phoenix Force's basic functions was decomposition. In destructive terms, his Phoenix Force rivaled the Omega effect. "No matter what this is, don't think it can surpass my Omega Force," Darkseid roared. The Omega Force surged to erase the Phoenix remnants clinging to his flesh, and he lashed out. The two forces collided, a continuous assault of annihilation, each blow scattering the other. David poured more of the Phoenix Force into the fight, becoming a humanoid phoenix, flame-lashed and relentless. Darkseid, a god who had once made whole universes tremble, found his Omega beams unable to secure any advantage. They streaked across the sky like two relentless comets. The earth beneath them was reduced to a courtyard at their pace. On Paradise Island, Diana, Firestorm, Element Woman, Hawkgirl, and Flash had arrived. They had been drawn into the Amazon Female Furies clash and moved to press the retreating Amazons. The Female Furies were new gods of Apocalypse, Darkseid's personal guard, and their strength overwhelmed ordinary defenders. Even together, Paradise Island's champions struggled to hold the line. Diana parried a falling iron club from Granny Goodness and looked up at the storm of energy racing overhead. "Dark Lord Darkseid," she whispered. The two combatants shredded the atmosphere. Hurricanes howled across the tree-filled island. Granny Goodness and the Female Furies looked up in disbelief. Who wrapped in that flame could even block Darkseid? It seemed impossible. Firestorm and the others, momentarily encouraged by the sight of David facing Darkseid, redoubled their efforts. "Overman, go!" Firestorm shouted, slamming a chunk of earth into a makeshift steel wall. Bernard's flame laser dagger sliced through the wall like a hot knife through butter. "You should worry about yourself," he sneered. He and the Female Furies believed Darkseid invincible. No matter who the challenger was, they expected him to be reduced to ashes by Omega beams. At first, the Furies' confidence seemed justified. Darkseid's attack was terrifying enough to level planets. Yet David's calm, unhurried counterattacks began to show results. Darkseid's appearance grew disheveled. Multiple burn marks of Phoenix fire marred his body. The Omega effect, besides ultimate destruction, had incredible self-repair. It could reconstruct him at a molecular level, but that restoration depended on what it fought. "In terms of destruction, my Phoenix Force is no weaker than yours," David said, his fists striking like meteors. But when it comes to recovery, your Omega Force is weaker than mine. I can heal what you do to me, yet you can't seem to heal from what I do to you. If you have no other moves, your defeat is inevitable. Do you think I'm only this, you Earth insect? Darkseid snarled and unleashed thick Omega beams from his eyes. The insult was still there, but beneath it was an urgency born of threat. Below, Granny Goodness and the other Furies watched their lord falter. How could their god be at a disadvantage? Diana and the Amazons watched with hope flaring. Darkseid's face twisted with rage. When I choose to kill, death itself follows like a shadow. No one escapes my will. He roared into the void, summoning something. David felt the hair on his arms rise. From a spatial vortex, a pitch-black figure lunged, armor like a medieval knight, gliding on skis, wielding two curved scythe-like polearms. The Black Racer, Death manifested, sliced through space with impossible speed. A black, devouring ray swept past David and struck him. He flew back, a clean, gaping wound nearly bisecting him. Black light throbbed in the wound, an absolute aura of death. Feel it? Do you feel death upon you? Darkseid laughed, clutching his chest like a victor. The Black Racer hovered near him like a loyal hound, eager to harvest souls. The island's defenders went pale. Granny Goodness and the Furies exulted. Great Dark Lord, no one can defeat you. Blood poured from David's wounds. Death eroded him unnervingly fast. He recognized the attacker from myth, the Black Racer, an aspect of cosmic death, a secret weapon Darkseid had used before when contending for cosmic power. Where death appears, the Black Racer can reach. No one survives its attack. You actually know? Darkseid sneered in surprise. He hadn't expected anyone on this remote world to recognize his trump card. Still, he wore the demeanor of a man certain of victory. This planet contains someone who can stop me? Your appearance astonishes me, but you'll still fall to my hand. After I cleanse this planet and obtain the anti-life equation, I will remember this skirmish. Your strength is notable, just not enough. David lowered a hand from his chest and smiled through the gray pallor of deathlight. Don't be so quick to give your victory speech, Darkseid. The Black Racer's power is terrifying, killing for you, even. But that doesn't mean I share your fate. Color returned to his face in moments. Diana and the others breathed a little easier. Firestorm and Element Woman pumped their fists in the air. Granny Goodness froze. She had expected the Black Racer's strike to be a sentence from the universe. How could this man survive? Darkseid, startled and enraged, commanded the Black Racer to strike again. The embodiment of death swept down like lightning, reopening wounds that promptly began to heal. The racer transformed into a black storm and spun around David, carving new cuts with every rotation. Then, as it circled, David reached up and seized its throat. You shouldn't have circled me so carelessly, he said flatly, scarred and winded but unafraid. He gripped the neck of death itself. No one touches the Black Racer unless they possess extraordinary power. Darkseid could command it with the Omega effect. David could hold it because of the Phoenix Force and something deeper. One of Death's embodiments? Coincidentally, my body has a deep connection to death as well, he said. The Phoenix Force flared from his palm and consumed the racer, annihilating it between heaven and earth and returning it to the universe's own death. Thanos had once stood as a balance of life and death. Cian had inherited Thanos' bloodline and become another miracle, a being whose connection to death outstripped even Thanos'. That connection, more profound than mere lineage, let death itself bend away. David clapped the ashes from his hands, and the look in his eyes made Darkseid flinch. Hades' power had once had no effect on him. That was not the limit of his immunity. With the Phoenix Force and his link to death combined, even an aspect of death within a universe was no longer fatal. Do you have any other cards? David asked. With a commanding, cold cry like a phoenix, he dove. The sky became a torrent of flame as he descended on Darkseid. No! Granny Goodness and the female Furies shrieked as their lord, eyes bloodshot, answered with a frantic, unwilling punch. I was one step from everything I've pursued my whole life. Just a little more, and I could have grasped the lasso to enslave the cosmos. Why did I encounter you on this tiny planet? Darkseid attacked desperately, but the tide had turned. David's blows grew more ferocious. Darkseid's wounds multiplied. Even simple punches sent the Dark Lord spitting blood and reeling. David wrapped a hand, shaped of the Phoenix Force, around Darkseid's neck. The god had no strength left to struggle. "This is your burial ground," David said coldly. Silence fell. A being who had made galaxies tremble was about to be killed. Granny Goodness and the Furies cried out in despair. Darkseid roared, tried to fire Omega beams in a last furious retaliation, but David's Phoenix Eye beams were faster. They destroyed Darkseid's eyes, pierced his skull, and Darkseid screamed as the fire consumed him. When it was over, only a skull remained of the Lord of Apocalypse. David tossed the massive skull up and down. "Darkseid, your skull will look good in my collection. A bit large for a footrest, but perhaps an ornament." No one could believe it. The skull emitted a deep red destructive glow. A symbol formed on it, the Omega. "The Omega effect?" Granny Goodness cried. The mark was its sign. Darkseid was dead. The Omega effect would search the universe for a new master. Before they could process the implication, the rotating symbol imprinted itself onto David's chest. A vast power poured into him. Red light of the Omega effect flamed in his eyes. Granny Goodness and the female Furies stumbled backwards, stunned. Why had the Omega chosen the man who had killed Darkseid? "Surprised?" David asked as he descended from the void. "I killed Darkseid, and yet I'm the one the Omega recognizes." In the comics, a similar contest had occurred. After Darkseid died, the Omega sought a new master. Clark and Lex had both been contenders, and Lex had claimed it. David, wielding the Phoenix Force, did not need the Omega. Still, when the Omega itself chose him, he would not refuse. "Since you're so loyal to Darkseid, I'll send you to join him." Holding Darkseid's skull, David let Omega beams flare from his eyes. The red annihilating light swept across Paradise Island. Granny Goodness and her followers tried to flee, but the beams glazed them to ash. Parademons and apocalyptic forces across the island turned to dust that fell like rain. "Oops, there are others who don't belong to this world," David said, his gaze widening beyond the sky. With the Omega added to his arsenal, his power had grown immeasurably. Omega beams lanced outward faster than light, sweeping across cities and plunging into the seas. From orbit, the Earth began to appear cloaked in crimson. Deep beneath the Atlantic, Batman led Arthur and others against Darkseid and his technology. Red beams stabbed into the seabed. Parademons nearby evaporated. Darkseid stood frozen as the annihilation swept toward him, feeling the will behind the power. "Your Majesty?" someone whispered. Watching an enemy who had been suppressing them dissolve, Batman looked up and studied the sky. He felt relief and a dawning comprehension. With this man around, Earth would be safe. If he could fell the universe's Dark Lord, who could oppose him? On Paradise Island, David looked down at the world he had saved. Killing Darkseid had been more than a victory. It had unlocked something that echoed faintly with the Omega effect he now wore. The final power he'd been seeking, which had always eluded him, stirred in response. "Too bad, I'm not interested in ruling the universe," he said, smiling and shaking his head. He could use the Omega not to conquer, but to protect. He could protect his family, his friends, everyone he knew. With Darkseid dead and the new gods of Apocalypse and their Parademon armies wiped out, Earth returned to peace. Word spread through the universe. On a remote living planet called Earth, a supreme being now walked, more terrifying and powerful than Darkseid, greater than any other. A new force had been born, the Overman.